Hello friends, before I start telling the stories, please like the video, leave your comment, where are you from and what time are you watching? Also subscribe to the channel, this will really help the channel grow. Thank you all. Now, get comfortable and let's start. I moved into my new place because I wanted quiet. After years of apartment neighbors blasting music through paper-thin walls, a small suburban neighborhood felt like peace. The street was calm, the houses evenly spaced, and everyone kept to themselves. But the biggest reason I chose this place was the neighbor directly across from me. A thin, older man who spent most of his time outside tending his perfect lawn. The realtor said he was harmless, just a quiet guy who loves his yard. I didn't think much of him until my third night here. It was 3 a.m. exactly. I woke up to a strange hiss outside my window. At first, I thought it was a leaking pipe or something electrical. But when I looked outside, I saw him, my neighbor, standing completely still in the middle of his yard, holding a garden hose aimed at the grass. He watered his lawn in total darkness. The only light came from the faint glow of the street lamp behind him, outlining his thin frame like a cardboard cutout. He didn't move. He didn't check the ground. He didn't even sweep the hose back and forth. The water poured straight down in one spot, soaking the earth until mud pooled around his shoes. I watched for a minute, then two. It never changed, just him, watering a single patch of grass at 3 a.m. Eventually, I went back to bed, telling myself maybe he couldn't sleep. Maybe watering the yard was his way of calming down. People do weird things. But the next night, he was out there again. Same time, same spot, same eerie stillness. By the end of the week, it became a routine. My body even adjusted to it. I woke up almost right at 3 every night, like something was gently shaking me awake whenever the water started. One night I decided to record it, just for proof. I opened the blinds slightly and hit record on my phone. But when I looked out, I froze. He wasn't standing in his yard this time. He was looking directly at my house, not moving, not watering, just staring. The hose still ran, water pouring onto his shoes until the ground around him turned black with mud. I couldn't see his face clearly, but I knew he was staring at me. The angle was too perfect, too still, like he was waiting for me. I dropped the blinds and backed away. The next morning, I walked outside, pretending I didn't just see him silently watching me in the dead of night. I tried to act normal when I waved at him across the street. He didn't wave back, didn't look at me. He was crouched down, inspecting the soaked patch of grass like it was something fragile. When I walked to my car, my foot stepped in something soft, mud. A perfect trail of it led across the street and stopped right at the edge of my driveway. But there were no footprints, just smooth streaks, like something heavy had been dragged, or like someone crawled instead of walked. I didn't sleep well that night. At 3 a.m. I woke up again, but this time I didn't get out of bed. I didn't dare look outside. But the sound of running water hissed through the neighborhood like always. 8 straight minutes. Then it stopped. Total silence followed, so quiet I could hear my breathing. Then something tapped on my window. Just once. Soft enough to feel accidental, but loud enough to freeze me in place. I didn't move an inch until the sun came up. The next day, I finally decided I needed to meet him. Maybe understanding him would calm my nerves. I crossed the street as he was kneeling in his yard, trimming grass that didn't need trimming. "Hey, I'm your neighbor across the street," I said. "I just moved in." He didn't look up, not even a glance. I tried again. "You got quite the routine with the lawn, huh?" This time he stopped moving entirely. He stayed crouched, but his head slowly turned, just his head, to look at me. His eyes were strange, too wide, like he wasn't blinking. "You shouldn't be outside at night," he said softly. I forced a laugh. "Why? Coyotes?" He turned his head back toward the grass, beginning to dig his fingers into the soil. "The ground is thirsty," he whispered, "but not for water." I felt a coldness creep up my spine. "What do you mean?" He didn't answer. He kept digging deeper with his bare hands until his fingers disappeared into the earth. When he finally stood up, mud dripped from his skin like dark ink. He turned and walked toward his house, leaving me alone on the lawn with a hole just big enough to see something inside. Something pale, smooth, like bone. I staggered back. What the hell? Before I could look closer, he turned around on his porch, watching me with those wide eyes. I pretended I saw nothing and hurried back home. That night, I forced myself to stay awake. I needed proof of whatever was going on. At exactly 2:58 a.m., I sat by my window, phone recording, waiting. At 3 a.m. sharp, his porch light flickered on. He stepped outside. But tonight he wasn't carrying a hose, he was carrying a bucket. He walked to the same patch of grass, crouched down and poured something thick onto the soil. Even from across the street, I saw the dark liquid absorbing into the earth in seconds. Then I saw his arm. It was cut, a thin line across his forearm, blood dripping slowly but steadily into the bucket he had just emptied. He was watering the lawn, with himself. I gagged and nearly dropped my phone, and he heard it. His head jerked up so fast it looked painful. He stared at my window, straight at me. I ducked below the windowsill, heart pounding, fingers shaking. 5 seconds passed. 10. Then I heard it, the slow, squelching sound of footsteps crossing the wet grass, crossing the street, coming toward my house. I crawled backward into the hallway just as something heavy brushed against the wall outside, dragging along the siding like wet fabric. Then came the soft tap on my window again. Not demanding, almost polite. I stayed there on the floor, gripping my phone, praying he wouldn't try the door. The footsteps slowly circled my house once, twice, then stopped. The hiss returned. He was watering the lawn again, but not his, mine. When I finally looked outside at sunrise, my yard was soaked. The grass shimmered dark red in the early light. I called the police. They checked his house, his yard, the weird patch of ground. None of it was enough to do anything. "He's odd," they said, "but not dangerous. He hasn't watered his lawn since. Now he waters mine." Every night at 3 a.m., I wake up to the sound of a hose spraying. I don't check anymore. I keep the blinds closed. I stay in bed. But every morning, my yard is drenched, and the mud near my window is streaked with those same dragging marks. And sometimes, when I look out just after sunrise, I catch him standing at the edge of my property, staring at me. No hose in his hand, just a bucket, waiting for the ground to get thirsty again. When I moved into the duplex, the landlord assured me the other unit was vacant. "Has been for months," he said, jangling the keys as he let me into my side. "Previous tenant moved out suddenly, didn't leave a forwarding address. We're still fixing the place up, so don't worry about noise." At the time, I actually liked the idea of an empty neighbor unit. After years of loud apartments and thin walls, having no one next door felt like luxury. The first few days were completely quiet. Too quiet, maybe. The duplex was old, built sometime in the 60s, and the walls were thick plaster instead of drywall. Every footstep echoed through the floors like I was living inside a wooden instrument. Even my breathing sounded loud. Then on my 4th night, I heard the knock. 3 slow taps on the shared wall, right beside my bed. I sat up immediately, heart thudding. At first, I told myself I imagined it. Old houses make noise, right? Pipes expand, wood settles, whatever. But then it happened again. 3 taps, in the exact same rhythm. I rolled out of bed, pressed my ear to the wall, and listened. Silence. I waited a full minute before backing away. Maybe it was the wind, maybe a branch. But the next night, it happened again. Same time, around 2:15 a.m. Same 3 knocks, same spot. After the 5th night in a row, I finally decided to ask the landlord if maybe someone was temporarily staying there. "Absolutely not," he said over the phone. "No one has keys but me. The place is empty." "Are you sure?" I pushed, because I keep hearing, "Look," he cut in. "Old walls carry sound. You're not hearing a person." But I knew what knocking sounded like. There was an intention behind it, a rhythm, almost like someone trying to get your attention. And it only ever happened at night. A week later, the knocking changed. Instead of the 3 taps, I heard footsteps, slow, dragging ones. They moved from the far end of the neighboring unit toward the shared wall, stopping right beside my bed. I could almost picture someone standing there, breathing through the plaster. Then came the whisper. It wasn't clear enough to understand, but unmistakable. Someone speaking right up against the wall, their voice a thin, trembling murmur like they were afraid of being heard by anyone but me. I sat up in bed, frozen. "Hello?" I whispered back before I could stop myself. The voice stopped instantly. A moment later, something scraped against the wall, like nails dragging softly down the plaster. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. The next morning, I decided to check the other unit myself. The landlord kept the side door locked, but I walked around the building to see if there was any sign of entry. What I didn't expect was the curtain. A single window on that side looked directly into the empty living room. When I moved in, it had been bare. Now, a curtain hung there, a dirty beige sheet pinned haphazardly across the glass. Someone had put it up recently. I stepped closer, squinting. The bottom of the curtain was damp, stained dark like it had been dragged through muddy water. I tried the doorknob, locked. I peered through the tiny gap between the sheet and the frame. Too dark to see anything. I backed away quickly. That night, the noises got worse. At 1:50 a.m., I heard the footsteps again. Faster this time, pacing. Back and forth, the boards creaking under each heavy step. Then a loud bang slammed the shared wall, rattling picture frames. I jumped out of bed, heart racing. "Stop!" I yelled, pounding the wall back. "Whoever you are, cut it out!" The banging stopped abruptly. Then someone whispered right against the wall, "You shouldn't have done that." I stumbled backward, suddenly ice cold. I didn't sleep. The next morning, I called the landlord again. "This isn't settling," I snapped. "Someone is in there," he sighed. "Look, people trespass sometimes. Maybe a teenager broke in through the back window. I'll check it out tonight." "Tonight?" I nearly shouted. "Can't you go now?" "I'm at work," he said flatly. "If someone's in there, they'll be gone by tonight. These types don't stay long." It wasn't reassuring. That night, I pushed a dresser against my bedroom wall and slept on the couch. At 2:15 a.m., the knocking returned. But this time, it wasn't on the wall. It was on my bedroom door. 3 soft taps. I froze under the blanket on the couch. The door was only 10 feet away, just around the corner. The tapping came again, louder. Then the doorknob jiggled. Something pressed against the other side, making the wood bow inward. I held my breath, praying it wouldn't open. After a long moment, the pressure stopped. But then, the footsteps started inside the duplex next door, heavy, uneven, shuffling back toward the shared wall. Something whispered again. This time I could make out a single word: cold. The landlord came by the next evening around 6 p.m., unlocked the empty unit and went inside. I paced on my porch, listening for anything unusual. After a while, he came out rubbing the back of his neck. "Nobody here," he said. "Windows locked, no signs of break-in." "What about the curtain?" I asked. "What curtain?" I narrowed my eyes. "On the front window. Beige sheet?" He frowned. "There's no curtain in there. Go look." I followed him inside. The air was stale and cold. The hardwood floors were scratched in long lines, like something heavy had been dragged. The living room was empty. No furniture, no belongings, nothing. But the window? Bare. No curtain. No pins. No stains on the glass. My stomach twisted. "I swear it was there," I said. "Maybe you saw something from the street," he said dismissively. "Angle can mess with your eyes." I didn't argue. I just wanted him to leave so I could lock my door again. That night, I didn't sleep on the couch. I didn't sleep at all. I sat in the living room with the TV on low volume, the lights dim, just listening. At 2:03 a.m., the electricity flickered. At 2:06 a.m., the thermostat clicked off. At 2:10 a.m., the house grew uncomfortably cold. And at 2:15 a.m., exactly on schedule, the knocking began. But this time, it came from inside my walls, not the neighbor unit. My wall. Something was moving inside the plaster, crawling slowly along the studs, dragging its fingers, whispering as it moved. The sound traveled from the far corner of the living room toward the hallway and then toward me. I stood up slowly, backing away from the wall. The whispering grew clearer. "Let me back in." I grabbed my keys and bolted out of the house. I didn't even put on shoes. I sat in my car in the driveway until the sun rose, shaking. At 8 a.m., I called the landlord and told him I was breaking the lease. I didn't care about penalties or fees. He didn't argue. When I returned that afternoon to grab essentials, I saw something that made my blood freeze. The curtain was back, pinned across the neighbor's window, dirty and stained, swaying slightly even though there was no breeze. As I loaded my car, the landlord arrived to lock up the empty unit again. He looked exhausted. "You know," he said quietly, "the last tenant in that side, she also complained about noises, said someone was knocking on her walls at night. I didn't believe her. She left without taking anything." I swallowed hard. "What did she hear?" He hesitated. She said someone kept asking to be let in. I didn't respond. I just got in my car and drove away, watching in the rearview mirror as the curtain shifted. Just a tiny movement, like someone was standing behind it. Someone who was never supposed to be there. When I first noticed the little girl in the neighbor's basement window, I thought nothing of it. Kids play weird games, especially when they're bored. I was washing dishes in my kitchen, half asleep, staring out at the driveway when I saw her, a small hand pressed against the glass of the dim basement room across from mine. Then she waved, slow, almost shy. I instinctively waved back. She smiled, or at least I think she did. The window was grimy, coated in that foggy residue old basements get. But her outline was clear, shoulder-length hair, small frame, pale face. She looked young, maybe 8 or 9. Nothing about it felt scary then, just a kid being friendly. But the longer I watched, the more something felt off. She didn't move away from the window. She didn't blink much, and her hand stayed pressed against the glass like she was waiting for something. Eventually, I stepped away to finish chores. When I checked again 10 minutes later, she was gone. That evening, I saw my neighbor bringing groceries inside. A tall woman in her early 40s with a tight bun and an expression that always looked 2 seconds from annoyed. I jogged over with a casual wave. "Hey, I saw your daughter earlier." She froze, a carton of eggs in her hands. "My what?" "Your daughter, in the basement." She waved at me through the window. She stared at me like I'd spoken another language. "I don't have children." I laughed awkwardly. "Oh, I must have seen someone visiting then." "No." Her voice was firm. "No one has been inside my house for weeks." For a moment, her eyes drifted past me, toward the basement window. When she looked back, her face had tightened. "If you see anything else in that window," she said quietly, "don't wave again." She didn't explain, just walked inside and shut the door. I tried writing it off. Maybe she didn't want to admit she was babysitting. Maybe she was private, whatever. But that night I kept glancing at the basement window while brushing my teeth. It was dark, completely still. The next morning I saw the girl again. I stepped into the kitchen with a cup of coffee, looked out the window, and there she was, standing at the glass, this time closer. Just the tip of her nose and her eyes visible above the windowsill. Her hand rose slowly, fingers stiff, and she waved again. I didn't wave back this time. My neighbor's warning echoed in my head, but the girl kept waving, her hand motioning back and forth like she was calling me over. Then I realized something that made my stomach twist. She wasn't standing. The basement window was barely 2 feet above the floor. For her face to be that high in the glass, she had to be kneeling. Or worse, pressing herself up against the window from below. I stepped away from the sink. She kept waving. I closed the blinds. For the rest of the day, I avoided looking outside. But that night, while taking trash to the bins, I made the mistake of glancing toward the basement window. The girl was there again, but not waving. She was tapping. Her tiny finger tapped the glass in a slow, rhythmic pattern. Too slow for impatience, too soft for panic. It was the kind of tapping someone uses when they're trying not to be heard by anyone else but the person they want. Tap, 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 3 pauses. Tap, tap, tap. I dropped my trash bag and hurried back inside. The next morning, I found muddy handprints on my driveway, small ones, child-sized, leading from the neighbor's house to mine. Halfway across the concrete, the prints suddenly stopped. No turning back, no fading. Just ended, like someone lifted her straight off the ground. I walked straight to the neighbor's porch and knocked. She answered quickly, like she'd been standing behind the door. "I told you not to wave at it," she said before I could even speak. "It?" I repeated. She sighed and stepped outside, closing the door behind her. "That basement, something's wrong with it," she said quietly. "I've heard footsteps down there since the day I moved in. Whispers, things moving at night. I thought it was animals at first, but then I heard it speaking." "What did it say?" Her eyes met mine. It asked where its mother went. I felt a chill crawl down my arms. "I thought it was a child," she continued. "So I called the police. They searched every inch, found nothing. No kids, no footprints, nothing." I swallowed. "But you've seen the girl too?" She shook her head. "I've seen a shadow, a shape, but never a face. That made me feel somehow worse. Why did it show itself to me?" That night I left every light in my house on. I kept all blinds closed. But around 2 a.m. something woke me, a soft tapping. Not from the basement window this time, from mine, my bedroom window. Slow, gentle taps on the glass, like small fingers trying to get my attention. I froze under the covers. The tapping grew more deliberate, then stopped. A faint scraping sound followed, then a whisper. "Why did you stop waving?" I nearly screamed. I forced myself to look, just a quick glance, just enough to see if I imagined the voice. My curtains were thin, too thin. A silhouette pressed against the other side, small head, slight shoulders, hair hanging loosely around her face. She moved. Her hand slid down the curtain, leaving a faint trail. Then the silhouette leaned closer, her face pressing against the fabric so tightly I could see the faint shape of her mouth moving. "Come downstairs." I grabbed the lamp next to my bed and yanked the plug from the outlet, heart racing. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. At sunrise, I checked the window. Outside, in the dew-covered dirt beneath it, were the same small footprints, dozens of them, leading from the basement window to mine. Some showed toes dragging, some looked like the foot twisted, bending the wrong way. I called the landlord. He brushed me off, saying the neighbor's kid must be sneaking around. I didn't bother arguing. That afternoon, I decided to look closer at the basement window. I approached slowly, forcing myself not to look directly into the glass. I crouched down, checking the frame. Old wood, warped, cracks in the aging paint. Then I saw it. Scratches, hundreds of them, etched into the inside of the glass. Thin lines, overlapping, almost frantic, like someone trapped inside had clawed at the window for years. I leaned closer, squinting. Words, barely visible, but definitely there, scratched deep into the glass. "Let me out." I stumbled backward. That night I heard something new. Not tapping, digging. Something was digging under my house, a soft scraping against the foundation, clawing through dirt, pushing, getting closer. The sound traveled along the side of my home, toward the corner beneath my bedroom. I curled up on the couch, gripping a flashlight, listening as the digging grew louder, then stopped directly beneath me. The floorboards creaked. I held my breath. A whisper drifted up through the cracks. "Let me in." I couldn't take it anymore. I packed a bag and left before dawn. Checked into a motel 20 miles away. Didn't even tell my neighbor I was leaving. But curiosity gnawed at me. I needed closure. So the next morning, just after sunrise, I drove back to grab the rest of my things. When I pulled into my driveway, I froze. The basement window across the way was shattered. Glass scattered across the grass. A trail of muddy footprints, tiny ones, led from the broken basement window straight toward my house, ending right beneath my bedroom window. My neighbor was sitting on her porch, shaking, pale as chalk. "She got out," she whispered when she saw me. "Last night, I heard it crawl up the stairs. It tried my door." "And you didn't call anyone?" I shouted. "What would I say?" She snapped. "That a little girl ghost broke my basement window? They'd institutionalize me." I stormed across my yard and up to my porch, then stopped dead. My front door was open. Just a crack, hinges bent slightly. Someone had pushed it from the inside. My phone buzzed suddenly, nearly making me drop it. A text from an unknown number. It was a photo, taken from inside my house, my bedroom. In the picture, the closet door was open a few inches, and reflected in the mirror was a small girl's face staring directly at the camera, smiling. The message under it read, "Why did you stop waving?" When I bought my house, everyone warned me about my backyard neighbor, Mr. Darren. They didn't say he was dangerous. They didn't say to avoid him. They all said the same unsettling thing. He doesn't leave the yard. At first I thought people meant he was a recluse, someone who preferred gardening to socializing. But no, they meant it literally. According to the neighborhood rumor mill, no one had ever seen him step onto the street, into a car, or even out the front door. He lived his entire life within a square patch of dying grass surrounded by a crooked wooden fence. I moved in mid-spring. The first morning while drinking coffee on my back porch, I saw him. He stood perfectly still in the center of his yard, tall, thin, wearing an old dark coat that didn't match the warm weather. His hands hung stiffly at his sides, fingers curled slightly inward. He stared at nothing, just the air in front of him. I waved. He didn't respond, didn't turn, didn't blink, just stood. After a few minutes, I went back inside, deciding not to overthink it. But later that afternoon, when I looked again, he was still there. Same spot, same posture. The sun dipped lower, the block got quiet, and when the porch light started flickering on around the neighborhood, he finally moved. But not naturally. He pivoted, his whole body turning stiffly like a scarecrow being rotated on a pole, until he was facing my house, just facing it. I stepped back into the shadows of my porch. His face was hard to see in the dim light, but his head tilted slightly, like he was studying my movements. I shut my curtains that night. The next morning, he was in a different part of the yard, as if he had teleported. No footprints in the grass, no signs of walking. He was crouched now, completely motionless, staring into the dirt. I decided to finally ask the neighbor on my left, an older woman named Lydia, about him while she was watering her flowers. "Does he ever leave the yard?" I asked. She hesitated, looking toward his fence. "He can't." That word made my skin crawl. "Can't?" I repeated. "What does that mean?" She lowered her voice. "Look, just don't talk to him, and don't let him catch you staring. That's all I'll say." I wanted to press further, but she abruptly went inside. That night, as I was turning off lights, I noticed movement through the gap in my blinds. He was standing against his fence, facing my house again. Only this time, he was closer than I'd ever seen. Just a few feet from the property line, leaning forward slightly, like he was trying to hear something inside my home. I stepped away quickly. The next few days were quiet, mostly. I tried ignoring him, but ignoring something works only when it doesn't know you're ignoring it, and he knew. Every time I stepped outside, no matter the hour, he would be in the yard, always facing me in whatever direction I appeared. If I opened my back door, he'd already be turned toward it. If I peeked out the bathroom window, he'd be angled perfectly toward that side. If I walked past the living room, even for a second, he'd shift his posture, slowly, deliberately, to keep me in his line of sight. I couldn't see his eyes clearly, but I felt his stare every time. One evening, around 11 p.m., curiosity finally got the better of me. I crept out to the fence, staying low, and looked through one of the old slats. He wasn't standing in the middle of the yard tonight. He was right on the other side of the fence, his face inches from mine. I stumbled backward with a gasp. His eyes didn't follow me. They didn't react at all. He just stood there, forehead pressed lightly against the wood, body rigid. And then he whispered. Not loud, not clear, just a soft scraping of breath against the fence. "Don't leave." I ran inside, heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. For hours, I paced, wondering if I imagined it. When I finally built the courage to peek out the window, he was back in the center of his yard, standing there like he always did. The next morning, something strange happened. I found footprints, bare footprints, leading across my yard, stopping right under my bedroom window. Except they weren't shaped correctly. The toes were too long, too thin, and deep in the dirt, the impressions weren't smooth. They were ridged, almost like the footprint of something with bone-like extensions beneath the skin. I checked his yard. He was standing in his usual spot, but his coat sleeve was torn, and his arm was wrong, bent sharply at an angle no human joint could bend, like it had been dislocated and never healed. That night, the sounds started, scraping along my back wall, rustling through the grass, soft tapping on the fence. And then, breathing, slow, deep breathing from just outside my bedroom window. I didn't open the blinds. I didn't want to see what waited on the other side. At 3:17 a.m., my motion lights flickered on. I stayed frozen in bed until I heard footsteps retreating back across the yard, slow and dragging. In the morning, I checked the camera I'd installed earlier in the week. The footage showed motion at 3:17, but when I hit play, it glitched. Lines of distortion blurred the entire screen. Only 2 frames were visible. Frame 1, a tall silhouette at the edge of my house. Frame 2, nothing. Completely gone. Later that morning, Lydia knocked on my door. "You need to listen carefully," she whispered, gripping my wrist. "He is not alive the way we are alive. He is bound to that yard. Something holds him there. Something old, something angry." "Bound how?" I asked. She looked terrified, even saying it. "He died there," she whispered. "But whatever took him didn't finish." The ground felt like it dropped beneath me. "Just stay inside at night," she added. "Don't answer if he calls. And whatever you do, don't let him touch you." That night, I triple-locked every door. At 2:48 a.m., something slammed into the back of my house, hard enough to shake the picture frames. I heard him whisper through the siding, "Don't leave me alone." I held my breath. The footsteps dragged along the wall, circling, stopping at my back door. The doorknob rattled softly. Then clearer, closer. I'm cold. I wanted to scream. Instead, I grabbed my phone and dialed 911, whispering into it. The operator put me on hold. On hold. While something scraped slowly up my back door as if climbing it. I pulled the curtains aside just enough to peek. He was hanging from my gutter, upside down. Back arched unnaturally, limbs dangling, head twisted toward my window with a stretched, unnatural grin carved across his face. His eyes were wide, pupils too large, almost filling the whole iris. The moment he saw me looking, he whispered, "You looked." He dropped to the ground without bending his legs, landing like a mannequin. Then he calmly walked backward, into his yard, spine unnaturally stiff until he reached the center, and stopped. Facing me again. The police arrived 20 minutes later. They searched his yard, but he wasn't there. The next morning, his yard was empty, his fence gate slightly open, and the ground where he always stood was disturbed, like something had finally dug its way out or dug its way deeper. I haven't seen him since. But sometimes late at night, I hear the scraping against my fence. And when I check through the blinds, I swear I can see a tall shadow standing just beyond the motion lights, waiting for me to come outside, waiting for someone to replace him, waiting for someone who won't leave the yard. When you move into a new house, you notice your neighbors whether you want to or not. Some introduce themselves, some keep to themselves, some give you that instant stay away feeling. But the family across the street didn't give me anything. Not a wave, not a glance, not even a flicker of light. Their house stayed completely dark, always. I moved in late autumn, when nights came early and mornings stayed gray. The street lamps flickered on around 6 p.m. Porches lit up. Curtains glowed warm, but their windows remained black, like they swallowed light instead of reflecting it. The house wasn't abandoned. I knew that from the very first night. Because at 1:14 a.m., while unpacking dishes, I looked outside and saw movement behind their living room window. Not light, not color, just the faintest shift of a silhouette, darker than the darkness behind it. It wasn't human-shaped, too narrow, too tall. I told myself I was tired. Shadows trick the brain when you're running on caffeine and cardboard box fumes. But I kept looking. Every night, their house stayed dark. Completely dead, except for the movement. Always subtle, always slow, always right behind the windows. I didn't see faces. I didn't see bodies. Only shapes. Shapes that didn't walk like people. Shapes that didn't bend like people. Shapes that stopped moving the moment you stared too long. A few days later, while sweeping my porch, I finally saw them outside the house. A man, a woman, and a kid, just standing in the front yard, perfectly still, not talking, not looking around, not even breathing from what I could tell. They stood shoulder to shoulder, facing the street, their faces completely expressionless. Then, as if synced, they turned their heads toward me. No smiles, no waves, just a slow, unnatural turn, like their necks were too stiff to move normally. The kid, maybe 8 or 9, tilted his head a little too far, like his neck joints bent the wrong way. I froze mid-sweep. And then, as one, the three of them turned around and walked back to the front door. Not fast, not slow, just mechanically. The door opened before anyone touched it. They walked inside, it shut, and the house went dark again. I stood on my porch for a long time after that, trying to figure out if I'd witnessed something normal or something deeply, irreversibly wrong. The next day I asked the neighbor 2 houses down, an older man named Roland, what their deal was. He went pale. "You saw them?" he whispered. "Yeah, I mean, are they okay? Do they just not use lights?" Roland stared at me like I'd just told him I took a stroll through a graveyard at midnight for fun. "They moved in years ago," he said. "But the house's power was cut long before then, hasn't been reconnected." "What? Then how do they live there?" He shook his head. "They don't." That answer made my stomach twist. "What do you mean they don't?" He leaned closer. "Just keep your blinds closed after dark, and if you see them outside late at night, go inside. Don't let them notice you noticing them." I waited for him to elaborate. He didn't. That night, I kept the blinds half closed, leaving only a sliver to watch through. At 1:14 a.m., the time I first saw movement, I peeked and immediately stepped back. They were standing on their porch, all three, facing my house, not moving, not blinking, just watching. The porch light still off. Their entire home was a silhouette, but their bodies were even darker, like didn't reflect the moonlight at all. I stood absolutely still, hidden behind the blinds, barely breathing. After a minute, the woman's head twitched, not turned, twitched, like a puppet string was pulled too hard. Then the man stepped forward, not on the porch, not down the steps. He stepped off the porch directly, his foot moving through the air as if the ground rose to meet him. He didn't drop, didn't stumble. He simply glided downward to the grass. The kid followed. Then the woman. They began walking toward my house, calm, silent, unnatural. I dropped the blinds and backed away, no footsteps, no voices, just silence. I waited in the hallway, heart pounding. After a full minute, a soft scraping sound moved along my siding, like fingertips dragging down the wall. Then a tap on my window. Not the front one, the side one. The one directly across from my dining room where the blinds weren't fully closed. I crawled low across the floor and reached up just enough to pull them shut. For a split second, my eyes rose above the windowsill, and I saw them, all three, pressed up against the glass. Faces pale, eyes wide, mouths slightly parted like they were trying to mimic a smile and failing. The kid's mouth twitched upward, too large, too stretched. I yanked the blinds down. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. In the morning, the house across the street looked normal again. No movement, no figures, nothing. But on the ground outside my window, in the dirt beside the foundation, were footprints. 3 sets, bare and deep. As if whoever made them was heavier than they looked. For days afterward, nothing happened. No movement behind their windows, no figures standing outside, no taps on the glass. I convinced myself it was sleep deprivation, stress, imagination. That illusion broke a week later. I came home late, past midnight, from a work shift. My headlights swept across their house. Their front door was open, just a crack. I should have gone inside and ignored it. But I'm human. Curiosity is a sickness, so I approached. Halfway across the street, the door slowly creaked wider. I froze. All the lights inside were still off. The house was completely dark, but something moved inside, deeper within. Shifting shapes brushing past walls, shadows sliding out of view as soon as the light touched them. Then I heard it, whispering, not from inside, from above. I looked up. All 3 of them were clinging to the underside of the porch roof, upside down, heads hanging, eyes locked onto mine, limbs bent like spiders, not blinking, not breathing, just watching. Their mouths opened simultaneously, and I swear I heard the whisper in my head, not my ears. "Why didn't you keep your blinds closed?" I ran. I don't even remember unlocking my front door. I just know I slammed it shut and curled up behind my couch until sunrise. When daylight came, their house looked normal again. Door closed, yard empty, not a soul in sight. I decided enough was enough. I packed a bag, called a moving company, told them I didn't care what it cost, I wasn't spending one more night here. When I went outside to load my car, I looked once more across the street. All 3 of them were standing in their yard again, motionless, facing my house, facing me. The kid raised his hand slowly and waved, not friendly, not curious, a wave that felt like a threat, like a promise. As I backed out of my driveway, I kept my eyes on them. They didn't move, didn't follow, didn't blink. But as I turned the corner, my phone buzzed with a notification, a photo from an unknown number, taken from inside my house, right behind me as I packed. In the photo, I'm bent over a box, and behind me, in the dark hallway, barely visible, 3 pale figures standing shoulder to shoulder, watching. The caption under the image was only 2 words, "Lights off." The first night I heard it, I thought it was just someone playing music late. My neighborhood was usually quiet, but even the calmest streets have the occasional night owl. It was a low, muffled sound, like a distant TV left on in another room. The strange thing was the repetition. At exactly 2:03 a.m., a faint voice began drifting through the neighborhood from the house 3 doors down, the old one with boarded side windows and peeling yellow paint. I never saw anyone go in or out of it, no cars, no lights, no deliveries. But tonight, a low warbling sound started playing from inside. Then a man's voice, "Hello? Can you hear me?" Repeat, can you hear me? Static. Then the same line again. Hello, can you hear me? Repeat, can you hear me? Over and over. I rolled over, put a pillow on my head, and forced myself to sleep. The next morning, curiosity chewed at me. On my way to work, I slowed down in front of that house. The blinds were closed. The curtains inside were so thick they blocked even daylight. A padlock hung on the gate, but something in the air felt off, heavy, like the house was holding its breath. That second night, the recording played again, 2:03 a.m. On the dot. Same voice, same static, same exact repetition. Hello? Can you hear me? Repeat, can you hear me? But this time I noticed something chilling. Sometimes the recording would skip, flicker, and the voice wouldn't match. It shifted pitch, tone, sometimes sounding like a woman, sometimes like a child, as if multiple voices were trying to speak through the same sentence. Like the recording wasn't meant to replay, but something else was hijacking it. On the fifth night, I finally snapped. I put on a hoodie, slipped out the back door, and walked toward the house. The cold air felt heavier the closer I got. The street lights didn't reach this part of the block, and the darkness pressed against my skin like physical pressure. The voice repeated, "Hello, can you hear me? Repeat, can you hear me?" But when I got within 10 feet of the front walk, it stopped. Not faded, not glitched, stopped. Silence engulfed the whole street. I stood perfectly still. Then a faint, almost inaudible whisper slipped out from behind the front door. "I hear you." I bolted back home. The next morning, I asked my neighbor Lila, the one who'd lived here longest, about that house. She stiffened immediately. "You heard it last night?" I nodded. She lowered her voice. "Don't ever go near it again." "What's inside?" I asked. "No one knows," she whispered. "But the man who lived there before, he installed speakers all over the house, every room, even under the floorboards." "Why?" She swallowed. "Because he was recording something he claimed wasn't coming through the radio, or the TV, or any device in the house. He said he heard it in the walls." My skin crawled. "What happened to him?" She looked away. "He left the neighborhood?" "No." Her voice trembled. "He left the house, just the house. He ran out screaming one night and never stepped back inside. Neighbors saw him running barefoot down the street." "What was he screaming?" She took a deep breath. "He kept yelling. It learned my voice." That night, I didn't sleep. At 2:03 a.m., the recording started again, but now the message wasn't the same. The voice had changed. It was my voice, my exact tone, cadence, and breathing pattern. "Hello? Can you hear me? Repeat, can you hear me?" I froze in bed. The voice continued looping. My voice, saying something I never said, something the house had somehow captured. How long had it been listening? Then the message changed again. Still my voice, but whispering. "Why did you come to my door?" I sat upright, sweat chilling my skin. Then the recording changed a third time. "Why did you step closer?" My throat dried. Then the fourth message. "I saw you." I got out of bed, heart pounding, and shut every window, every curtain. The recording grew louder, like the speakers inside the house were turning themselves up. "I see you. I hear you. I'm coming closer." I covered my ears. At 2:17 a.m., something slammed against the inside of the house's front door, hard enough to echo down the entire block. Then another slam, and another. Then silence. I sat on the floor, knees drawn to my chest, waiting. At 3:42 a.m., something tapped on my back door. Once, twice, 3 times, slow, rhythmic, like knuckles learning the pattern of my house. I didn't move, didn't breathe. The tapping stopped, but a soft scrape, like nails dragging across metal, moved across the door, then across the siding, then beneath the kitchen window. And then the voice whispered again, this time outside. "Can you hear me?" Slow exhale. Repeat, "Can you hear me?" I didn't look. I couldn't. At sunrise, the noise finally stopped. I told myself I imagined it, until I saw the footprints, muddy, bare, leading from the yellow house straight to mine, then stopping under my bedroom window. The next day, I tried calling the town to report the house as unsafe. The woman on the phone sighed. "You're not the first neighbor to complain," she said. "But legally, the property is sealed. No owner, no tenant, no electricity, no water, no access." "No owner?" I asked. "Correct. The last known owner died 7 years ago." "He what?" She repeated it plainly. "He died. The property has been vacant ever since." My hand shook. "But someone's in there," I whispered. "No one has keys," she insisted. "The place is boarded inside and out." I hung up. That night I sat awake again, clutching a kitchen knife like it meant anything. 2:03 a.m. The recording returned, but tonight, every voice was different. Old, young, male, female, all overlapping, whispering variations of the same line. Hello? Can you hear me? Repeat, can you hear me? Hello? Why did you step closer? Why did you come near my door? Let me in. The voices grew louder, layered, discordant. Then suddenly, clack! My front doorknob twisted, slow, deliberate. I froze. The lock rattled. Something tapped the wood 3 times. You hear me now? I'm coming in. Repeat, I'm coming in. I backed slowly into the hallway. The doorknob jerked violently. I screamed, and then silence. Dead silence. No voices, no recording, no movement. When dawn came, I checked the porch with trembling hands. My doorknob was bent, the wood was splintered, and at the bottom of the door, perfectly aligned across the threshold, was a speaker. Small, old, rusty, like it had been pulled from deep inside that abandoned house. A note was taped to it. Just 3 words. Now you play. I moved out 2 days later, but the first night in my new apartment, at exactly 2:03 a.m., a soft static hiss filled my bedroom, a speaker somewhere in the walls. Then my voice whispered, "Hello? Can you hear me? Repeat, can you hear me?" When I bought my house, I barely noticed the neighbor on my right. A quiet woman in her late 50s, thin as a rake, always wrapped in an oversized sweater no matter the season. She kept to herself, never waved, never smiled. She was the kind of person you forget exists until you accidentally lock eyes with her watering the same patch of grass every morning. But the first thing I really noticed about her was the boxes. Small, wooden boxes, each no larger than a shoebox, completely hand-built, rough, and stained dark like they'd been soaked in old rainwater. Every Sunday at sunset, she'd take one of these boxes from her porch, walk into the far corner of her yard, dig a shallow hole, place the box inside, cover it with soil, pat it down, and stand over it for several minutes with her head bowed. Every Sunday. She never skipped a week. The first couple of times, I assumed they were time capsules, garden kits, or something sentimental. Old people bury weird things sometimes. But after the 7th consecutive Sunday, my curiosity turned into fixation. What the hell was she burying? One evening, after she finished and went inside, I wandered to the fence and glanced across her yard. Fresh dirt mounds dotted the far corner like small graves. Too many for comfort. I counted 14. 14 boxes. 14 weeks. 14 burials. But something else bothered me. Nothing ever grew on that soil. Not a blade of grass. Not a weed. The dirt stayed loose and dark, as if whatever she buried poisoned the ground. The 13th Sunday was when she noticed me watching. She froze halfway through covering a box. Slowly, her head turned toward the fence. Her eyes, dark and hollow, locked onto mine. She didn't blink. Then she smiled. It wasn't a warm smile. It was the kind of smile someone gives when they're caught doing something they shouldn't, but don't mind being caught. The next day, she appeared on my porch. I'd never seen her up close before. Her skin was pale and tight around her cheekbones, her lips dry and cracked like she never drank water. When she spoke, her voice was papery. "Curiosity is a sickness," she whispered. "It kills quicker than anything in those boxes." I swallowed. "What's in them?" She tilted her head. "Not for you." Then she turned and walked home like nothing happened. That night, I couldn't stop thinking about the boxes, the way she stared at them, the way she guarded that corner like a dog guarding a bone. At 3:12 a.m., I was jolted awake by a noise, scratching, soft and steady, coming from her yard. I peeked through my blinds. She was out there, digging, not burying this time, unburying. Her thin arms worked quickly, clawing away the dirt with bare hands. When she pulled the box out, she pressed her ear to it like she was listening for something. Then she opened it. I couldn't see what was inside, but her reaction said everything. A violent shudder, a gasp, a small trembling sob. Then she slammed the lid shut and reburied the box deeper than before. After she left, I lay awake for hours trying to understand what kind of box needed to be dug up at 3 a.m. just to be immediately buried again, and what the hell she heard inside it. The next morning, I had my chance to ask. She was sitting on her porch, staring at the ground like she hadn't slept. "Rough night," I joked, forcing a smile. She didn't look at me. "You heard it." "Heard what?" I asked, even though I knew. "The box," she whispered. "They don't stay quiet forever." My blood ran cold. "What's in them?" She looked up, eyes burning with a kind of tired fear I didn't understand. Pieces. I frowned. Pieces of what? She paused, then said, not what, who? I stepped back instinctively. She sighed as if exhausted by my confusion. You live alone, she said. You don't understand yet. Understand what? That memories don't die when people do. They rot, and they crawl, and they whisper. My skin prickled. Are you burying people? She laughed softly. No, just what's left of them. I didn't ask any more questions. That night I checked the corner of her yard again, and that's when I noticed something terrifying. One of the mounds was disturbed, freshly disturbed. I couldn't sleep. Every sound made me jump. My imagination filled in the silence with whispers, scratches, faint tapping from beneath the floorboards. Around 2:40 a.m., I heard it again, scratching. Not in her yard this time, in mine. Soft, gentle, coming from the base of my fence. My heart stuttered. I tiptoed to the window and looked down. Something small and wooden was poking through the soil on my side. A box. I rushed outside with a flashlight. There it was, partially pushed under the fence, the same size and shape as hers. A note was tied to it with string, my name. I picked it up with shaking hands. It was light, too light. The note said they remembered you. I nearly dropped it. Before I could force myself to open it, my neighbor stepped outside. No, she hissed, rushing across her yard. Don't open it, not yet. She grabbed the box from my hands. You can't let them see you, she said, eyes frantic. You can't let them smell you. They latch on, they follow. What is in that box? I shouted. Her expression softened, full of pity. Someone you forgot. I don't know anyone who died, I insisted. She shook her head. You don't have to know them, they just have to know you. A chill stabbed straight down my spine. Go inside, she whispered, and whatever you hear tonight, don't answer it. I didn't sleep. At 3:01 a.m. I heard it, the soft knock on my back door. 3 taps. Then a voice I didn't recognize whispered through the cracks. You forgot me. I covered my ears. The knock came again. Let me back in. And again. You buried me. My heart thundered. Tears filled my eyes. I pressed my back to the wall, shaking. The voice grew more desperate, more distorted. I'm still here. I'm not done. I want my peace back. Then something slid under my door, a thin, gray finger, too long, too slender, scratching along the hardwood floor. I screamed and kicked it away. It snapped back under the door like a retracting claw. Silence followed. Then footsteps, light, childlike, running across my porch toward her yard. I stayed up until dawn. When morning came, I checked outside. The box she took from me was now buried in her corner, deep, judging by the height of the mound. She was sitting cross-legged beside it, hands in her lap, staring at nothing. What was that thing? I whispered across the fence. She didn't look at me. It wasn't a thing, she said softly. It was a memory, one that shouldn't have lived this long. I swallowed hard. Is it gone? She finally turned her head. No, she whispered. They never go. They only sleep until the next noise wakes them. Fear twisted my stomach. What wakes them? Her eyes lifted toward my house. You did. There are neighbors who are friendly, neighbors who are weird, neighbors who are forgettable, and then there's the neighbor who somehow knows everything you never said out loud. When I moved into my townhouse, I figured I'd be surrounded by retirees and quiet families, people who complained about recycling bins and holiday decorations, not people who burrowed under my skin. But on my second day living there, I met him. He was sitting on his porch, hunched forward, elbows on his knees, staring at my house like he'd been waiting for me to step outside. Thin man, late 40s, maybe early 50s, hair messy, clothes wrinkled and stained with old paint. He didn't smile, he didn't wave. He just said, "Your bedroom is on the left, isn't it?" I froze. Yeah. How did you know?" He shrugged. "You put your dresser against the wall that faces east. People who do that like morning light." I hadn't told anyone that. Hell, I hadn't even opened my blinds long enough to see which way the sun rose. I laughed it off. Lucky guess. He didn't respond, just leaned back in his rocking chair and murmured, "You keep the window open a little when you sleep, for air." I shut my door immediately. That night, as I lay in bed, I couldn't shake the feeling of being observed. I closed the blinds, locked the window, double-checked the deadbolt, still couldn't sleep. The next morning, he waved me over while I was getting my mail. "You were restless last night," he said casually. "Bad dreams?" I swallowed hard. How do you know that? He tapped the side of his head. I hear things. What kind of things? He smiled faintly. Thoughts. I forced a laugh. You can read minds, huh? He didn't laugh back, didn't break eye contact. I know you didn't move here for the job, he whispered. You moved here to get away. My throat tightened. He couldn't have known that. No one knew that. Not even my coworkers. Not even my family. He stood and walked closer, stopping just a foot away. You shouldn't leave your journal in the nightstand, he said softly. People always check there first. I felt sick. I'd never told anyone I kept a journal, and I certainly hadn't left my door unlocked. How did you get inside my house? I asked. He raised his eyebrows. I didn't. You did. That sentence rattled me all day. I changed the locks, twice, but every morning, he'd casually mention something he'd have no way of knowing. You hum when you're cooking pasta. You always eat half the banana and throw the rest away. You left your water running at 4 a.m. You sleep with your hand under your cheek. You cried when you read that letter. I stopped going outside as much, but that didn't help, because now he started talking through the fence when I walked past. You shouldn't blame yourself for the accident. You did what you could. It wasn't your fault. My chest tightened so hard I nearly collapsed. I hadn't spoken of that accident to anyone, not once. I'd buried it so deep that it barely surfaced in my dreams anymore. But he knew. He always knew. After 2 weeks of this, I approached him. How do you know these things about me? I demanded, voice shaking. He tilted his head. You're loud. I don't talk to anyone, I snapped. He smiled for the first time. It wasn't a happy smile. You don't have to speak for something to hear you. I stepped back. What is that supposed to mean? His smile widened, almost too wide, stretching skin that shouldn't stretch that far. It lives in the space between houses, he whispered. Thin walls, thin places. It hears everything, remembers everything, and when you moved here, it learned you. He tapped his temple. And it likes telling me things. I stormed back inside, slamming the door. I called a therapist, a priest, then a locksmith again, desperate for someone to explain this behavior. But none of that mattered. Because that night, I woke up at 3:17 a.m. to something breathing in my room. Slow. Heavy. Too close. I sat up, heart pounding. My room was dark, only a sliver of moonlight sliding through a gap in my blinds. Behind me, something shifted. Something tall. Something wrong. I reached for the lamp, but before I touched it, a whisper hissed inches from my ear. You shouldn't have tried to forget. I screamed and spun around. Nothing there. I ran to the door, locked, checked the windows, still latched, everything was sealed, but the whisper lingered like breath on my skin. The next morning, my neighbor was already on his porch waiting for me. You heard it last night, he said. I didn't speak. His eyes darkened. Don't ignore it. That makes it angry. I'm calling the police. I spat. He shook his head calmly. Won't help. They can't hear it. It doesn't talk to everyone, only the ones carrying too much. My stomach twisted. What does it want? I whispered. His voice softened. It wants to ease the weight you carry. It wants to take pieces from you so you don't drown in them. But once you give it a piece, it keeps taking. I stepped back slowly. Don't come near my house again, I warned. He didn't follow. He didn't need to. Because that night, the thing whispered again, from inside my walls. You left me there. You forgot me. You never forgave yourself. The guilt, the memories, the accident, the weight I tried to bury deep inside myself. It was digging them back up. I stuffed towels against the vents, turned music up as loud as I could, slept in my closet. Nothing helped. Every night it whispered more. You lied to the officer. You could have swerved. You saw the headlights. You waited too long. I broke down. I screamed at the walls. I punched them until my knuckles bled, and the whisper rose in pitch like it was laughing. The next morning, my neighbor whispered over the fence. It's almost inside. I shook uncontrollably. How do I stop it? He stepped closer, too close, and whispered, You don't. You give it what it wants. What does it want? He smiled again, that awful stretched smile. Your confession. That night, I didn't fight the voice. I let it speak. I let it replay every moment of the accident. The skid, the scream, the guilt, the way I froze instead of swerving, costing someone their life. And the more I remembered, the louder it grew. Until finally, through tears, I whispered, It was my fault. The whole house went silent. Then something thin slid across my floorboards like long fingers dragging themselves closer. A gentle whisper rose behind my ear. "Thank you." The weight in my chest, the years of guilt, evaporated all at once. I collapsed, sobbing, breathless, exhausted. When I looked up, I saw it. A tall, impossible shadow stretching along my wall. It had no face, no body, just shape. Then it slid through the cracks of my wall like smoke and vanished. In the morning, I felt lighter than I had in years. My neighbor waved from his porch. "It took your guilt," he said. "That's how it feeds." I swallowed. "Is it gone now?" He shook his head slowly. "When you give it one piece, it always comes back for another." My blood ran cold. "What does it want next?" I whispered. He smiled. "Your secrets."